Welcome all of you my YouTube channel's program. This is the sixth video on the subject communicative aspect of literature under the light of social psychology. In this particular video, I am dealing with chapter 4th A, elements of literary communicative activity specially considered. In this part, I am going to analyze the elements in more detail, giving special attention to all the sides, inner essence, and outer characteristic features of the elements listed below as far as possible. As we have listed in the part third to A, there are 6 elements in the first 2 spheres of L.C.A, that is, the sphere of perception and that of creation. Those elements are the subject, first element, that means perceiver and the writer. Second element, recipient, the person or persons to whom the writer tells. The things, the person or system that receives the message sent by the communicator in general communicative activity, that is called GCA. Third one is object, anything, any event, phenomenon which becomes object for the writer's perception and creation. Fourth one is media, system of signs. Media means system of signs, language through which the communication or communicative activity takes place. It may be writing or it may be perception. Fifth one is place. Place means location, any geographical area, location of the subject's activity of perception and expression. Sixth element is time. In which year, in which season or days, at what time, in what context, in what situation, the acts of perception and expression. Expression means creation. Creation takes place, and this element can be subdivided into two: personal context and social one. Seventh one is social group, to whom or to which socio-cultural group, class, caste, the writer or recipient object belong to. Even the place, language also bear the traits of one or the other social group or culture. Let us start with fourth A, the subject, the writer. Subject must be given the first priority in our present discussion in accordance with the two different but interrelated spheres. Before going to the two spheres separately, there are some things which are common for both the spheres which need to be taken note of here. The subject is the most prominent element in both the spheres of L.C.A mentioned above. The subject is nothing but another word for the writer. He is supposed to be a man of some literacy, that is, either formal or informal education. He is supposed to be a man who has some specific mental orientations to discern, to understand, to analyze what is going on inside his self first and what is going on outside of him next. That is, it may be his immediate surrounding or external world, including the human and non-human world as a whole. His very intention as a double-edged knife is to discover what is a special thing for his work of art while it being engaged in perceiving, understanding, experiencing and feeling the things, events, phenomena as any other common man in the society. He differs from the common man in his intensity of feeling and experiencing the things and creating a work of art by utilizing those experiences. Let us start from the sphere of perception here. Fourth A1, the sphere of perception. It is the first job of any writer or the subject to get all his senses opened to the external world that includes mainly the two, the nature and the human society. In nature, where he meets flora fauna, he meets the hills, the rocks, the clouds, beasts, birds, the trees, the wind, the rivers, the sea, the sky, the sun, the moon, the stars, and many more in whichever forms the nature gets manifested to us. The very manifestation of the nature may be beautiful, horrific, ugliest, cruel, pathetic, and in many other forms. In the human society, he comes across the same beautiful, horrific, ugliest, cruel, pathetic, and in many other aspects of life in general. But the human society is not like the nature in everything. It differs from the nature in the way that it has socio-economic cultural hierarchy of people forming the nature of society. The writer, as the part of this kind of society, lives in the midst of people, and there he is supposed to be attentive to everything he sees looking around, but surely he gets impressed by those things of his interests whichever appeal to him. What appeals to him and interests him is determined by his sensibilities and interests, and sometimes his biasness decides on what he should take in and what not. He gets a special experience of those that express him. He examines them intuitively by turning their all sides visible to his inner sight, and photographed them and stored those experiences and feelings aroused by them in his inner self. These stored experiences, feelings, emotions begin to urge him to respond to those situations at an appropriate time, especially whenever he gets drenched by the emotional and intellectual fountains being pumped out by some moments of his inspirations. These can be nothing but the things that have given him an intense experience. And hence, as Abercrombie has aptly said, only those of giving the writer an intense experience will become the subjects of work of art he is likely to take up for writing. A writer's role in the sphere of perception can be compared to a role of a drone camera being operated by a professional photographer. The skilled photographer gets his drone with the camera being flown over a particular spot and captures the pictures as a whole and to whatever style, side, and model he wants with a specific effect of those pictures, and later gets them printed with whatever color and impressions he wants in his color lab. But the special things of observations about the writer is that as he belongs to a particular social groups, he is not supposed to act as objectively as the drone camera because of his personal specific human qualities like his interests, love, affection, biasness, and limitations of the psychological and intellectual faculties, all of which are manipulating his role of perception. For example, a writer of high social rank is not supposed to show as equal interest as a writer from a downtrodden class. He is supposed to show about the ugliest, saddest, filthiest, pathetic conditions of the poor lying by the roadside huts and tents. Similarly, for a writer of lowest strata of our society, the lives of rich can arouse hated feelings and may plunge him into the deeper thoughts, becoming somber. If he were a Marxist, he can find those rich as if they were the exploiters of the poor or held responsible for such ugliest but pathetic conditions of those who are lying by the road in the poor tents. For a writer from a very highest strata of society, devoid of mercy and kindness about the poor and the dirty stock of people, these people seem to be dangerous to the peaceful life of the society. Their pictures can cause havoc among those who have a negative impression of them, and they think that rustic people to be robbers, killers, or barbers. It cannot be generalized at outright which pictures or sceneries of lives a writer may come across impress him either positively or negatively, because the point is that neither the nature nor characteristic features of the object under perception alone, nor of the subject at work alone be determinant, but the dialectical relationship being established by the time of perception, even later, between the things pertaining to the subject, the pursuer, and of those pertaining to the object to be pursued is always at work, and that will decide how and by which facet of the object does the subject in the act of perception gets impressed, whether positively or negatively. For a writer with no interest about the beauty of nature, the nature is nothing but a mute thing or dead matter. Just it looks to him no more than a storehouse of dead material things lying there in the open air for satisfying the needs of man. But it is not so with those who are interested in nature and whoever reveres it as the abode of divine power. Rivers with crystal waters, trees with green leafy buds and beautiful fragrant flowers, mountains, creepers, birds, and beasts, which are seen to be as lively as humans for those who are interested in nature. The metaphysical poets like John Donne and the nature poets like Wordsworth of English Romanticism and Kuempu of Kannada Navodaya literary movement can be cited as the best examples for this later case, to whom the nature is as mystic as the God, and the God lies nowhere outside the nature. Each and every moment and each and every phenomena of nature manifests the existence of the God in it. It is the subjective stand of these poets that man's view decides what he witnesses. ಶಿವ ಕಾಣದ ಕವಿ ಕುರುಡನು ಶಿವ ಕಾವ್ಯದ ಕಣ್ಣೋ, ಸೂರ್ಯೋದಯ ಬರೀ ಸೂರ್ಯೋದಯವಲ್ಲ ಎಂಬಿತ್ಯಾದಿ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯಗಳು ಕುವೆಂಪುರವರ ಪಕ್ಷಿಕಾಶಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ತಾವು ಗಮನಿಸಬಹುದು. What is seen in the nature entirely depends upon how he looks at the nature. Now, how intuitively he observes it. A saint like deeper interaction with the nature is needed to see the God in every part and every moment of the nature, according to Kuempu. In the sphere of perception, a writer, the subject, pursues the things. Subjectivity rules and dominates, in the most cases, the whole process. But the role of objective view, even in the lesser degree, is at work, which produces an art of complexities and contrasts, which form the very nature of the object itself. The chief object of art is not so simple as to show all of which in a single straight line. The rise and the sets of the moon and the sun, floating clouds above the sky, twinkling stars, roaring rivers, and waves of a sea, anything, any glimpse of the nature is not so simple. Similarly, any event, any pictures, any scenery of the real lives of human beings is also not so simple as to show it completely in a mirror, displaying all their facets, insides and outsides. Anyway, a sort of communication being the between the two ends, between the subject and the object, that come into the relationship with each other, gets established by sending towards and receiving from the subject and the object, in which the chief active doer is the subject itself, but it doesn't mean that entire role of the object is passive. But it must be admitted that The active role of the object that comes into the relationship with the subject entirely depends upon the activeness of the subject, which must work keeping all its tools of perceptions opened towards the external world where is objects for perception being stored. The subject, the writer, must make his object awakened, speak to him through its codes. It is he who must make coding and decoding between himself and his object current and actively occurring, and the whole process of inner communication successful. It is his knowledge about the things of the world where he lives and his sensibilities, experiences, etc., of them that can enable the object to begin interacting with him. And this is more true in case of the objects of some particular nature, especially, for example, the objects with either any ancient historical or cultural background cannot be understood what they are, and they look like a nut to him who don't have any idea of them. Therefore, unless the subject is supplied with some notions and some ideas of them, either from the store of his memory or from that of his knowledge, such things of particularities cannot independently send signals to the subject in the act of perception. Consequently, there will be no communication. For example, Ashoka Pillar, Buddha Stupas, Taj Mahal, Ashwat Tree, the monkeys in India, the Ganga River, Anjanadri Hill, etc. cannot help the subject to understand them, cannot arouse any sort of feeling in him if he remains unaware of their historical and cultural importance. So, it is desirable on the part of the subject that he must have some knowledge, some ideas, some notions about the object that he comes into contact with. Otherwise, they are not to him. Even the common things, either of the nature or of the human world, like flowers, rivers, hills, poverty, a murder, an accident, demand at least some interests, some patience to show some attention towards them from the subject. The subject with no knowledge, no interest, no sensibilities, no patience is helpless with regard to knowing, understanding, analyzing, and feeling the things and establish a sort of inner communication between himself and the objects by awakening them to speak to him in either in their language. So this condition itself could not result in creating any kind of art. It clearly suggests that failure in the act of perception results in nothing in the act of creation. In the most cases, the success of communication in perception as well as in creation depends upon the subject's active role. Only his activeness can make his objects active. If he remains passive, his objects will also remain passive. It is desirable that his lenses fixed at the work of perception must be so clean and so transparent that nothing of his side must obstruct his act of photographing the object. As far as his lenses of senses are free from the particles of dust and wet drops of mist and the shadow of cloud of his personal biasness, love, hatred, etc., so far can the result of his photographing be expected to be good and objective. This objectivity will help him in making the work of art as good as to give justice to the object he pursues. Therefore, it is necessary for the subject to free himself from all the tinges of his own personal and impersonal things, the limitations of his caste, class, and creed, of his social group. He must keep himself away from his personal and social time context and must put himself into the time and context of object, and it is a must in case of historical objects. In short, the subject must put its or his legs into the shoes of the objects, and then only he can get the objective experiences of the objects. It is the subject who must make his object come into his contact. Unless he does it, he cannot make his object interacting with him through its media of communication, of signals, codes, etc. For instance, if he either does not go to the Himalayas in person or watches it through any other media, the whole or some sceneries of the Himalaya doesn't itself come into his contact. Hence, there will be no communication and no perception, and there will be no work of art on the object, that is Himalaya. Even the coding and decoding between the subject and the object entirely depends upon the subject's abilities of enabling the object sending its codes or symbols towards the subject, through which the subject can get some information about the object, and this information he collects through the symbols can have a sort of psychological influence over the mind of the subject. This process of psychological influence being made can help the subject forming his opinion about the object. This opinion, in its broader sense, includes the subject's feelings, experiences, attitudes, his views, his ideas, empathy, and many others he forms through his interaction he does with the object. This whole process can be called as a sort of inner communication in which the subject's opinion about the object is formed, and in forming such opinion, the subject's prior knowledge and experience about the object and any other kind of information about it he recalls and recollects either from his memory or from any external sources help the subject a lot. That opinion he forms at the time of perception will be reformed, recreated, and developed by the time of creation. And what is finally reformed, recreated, and developed will become the substance of the work of art. The act of perception and creation of the subject can take place either simultaneously in the same place or separately in different time and different place. These different time and place can have their impact upon the subject matter of work of art by having psychological influence over the entire process of literary communicative activity, that is L.C.A. So this is the end of this discussion of this topic. Thank you very much.